just feel compelled to come on right now and just tell you what pieces of shit that I think Joe Manchin and Susan Collins are. I just finished watching the most disgusting display of rationalizations for this other piece of shit, this Brett Kavanaugh, that they're putting on the Supreme Court. And like I posted yesterday, this is a crisis of legitimacy in our country that I have not seen since Bush versus Gore. This, what the Supreme Court did with that election. And I think this is even worse because this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that we do not have one institution in this country that is not either partisan, corrupt, or totally captured by corporations, by billionaires, by special interests. And for Collins to talk about the special interests opposing Kavanaugh when there is far more dark money of special interest from that judicial review organization or whatever it's called supporting him is the height of hypocrisy and irony. And she went on and on justifying his decisions in the past and how he was not going to be partisan, and even had the gall to say, well, he told me unequivocally. He told her unequivocally? This is a man that has not hesitated to perjure himself since the fucking beginning of these hearings. And for her to talk about this sham FBI investigation and what, you know, was corroborated and not corroborated, not to mention the fact that a sex crimes prosecutor just wrote a brilliant article the other day saying why there doesn't have to be corroboration. The FBI investigation was a sham. They would not allow the FBI to interview people that were going to corroborate her story, or not even corroborate what happened that night, but just to corroborate the drinking and all the other lies that he told about himself. Not to mention Lisa Graves, who was on my show talking about the Manny Miranda memos that he lied about seeing when he was trying to get those extreme right-wing judges approved during the George Bush administration. Not to mention that he lied about not seeing any of Alex Kaczynski's disgusting pornographic emails that everybody knew he was sending out. Not to mention the fact that he lied about the yearbook references. I mean, that was just incredible. So she's talking about all these decisions and how he's not going to be partisan. He's assured her he's not going to be partisan, and doesn't once mention, well, actually, I think she did use the term judicial demeanor in terms of referencing somebody else's quote. She referenced a former law clerk, I think the name was Lisa Black or something, completely not mentioning the fact that 3 of his former law clerks just basically sent a letter saying he should not be confirmed. She talked about the American Bar Association recommendation without mentioning the fact that they basically rescinded their recommendation. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm just completely floored by what I heard. And what I'm even more floored by is that anybody thought that Susan Collins was going to save us because of her concern for Roe versus Wade. I mean, let's face it, she approved Gorsuch, and Gorsuch is going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And it's not even a matter of whether Roe versus Wade gets overturned, quite frankly, because they've been chipping away at abortion rights in the states for decades now. I think there's something like 7 states where you can't even get an abortion, or it's very difficult to get an abortion, with all these parental notification rules, etc., etc. And these are the things that he's going to uphold. These are the things. They're not even going to have to overturn Roe versus Wade to make it impossible to get an abortion in this country. I mean, it's just her. Either she's really stupid, or she thinks we're really stupid to fall for this crap. What else was I going to say? Oh, and Joe Manchin. Don't even get me started on Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is a fucking dino. He's never been a Democrat, a progressive Democrat, certainly. And And Democrats should have known this about him. All of a sudden, people are posting about Joe Manchin as this is some sort of revelation. Joe Manchin has always voted with the Republicans, and when people should have cared about this was when that excellent candidate who I live streamed when she came out to Los Angeles, Paula Jean Swearington, coal miner's daughter, Bernie Sanders' progressive, was running against him. That's when people should have started doing something about Joe Manchin, not now when it's too late. I mean, really, we have a crisis of legitimacy in this country, and it's not a matter of, and I feel that the women's groups really were bad with the strategy here, because they made it all about believing women. And this was a last-minute thing that came forward, and I totally support Christine Ford. I totally believe her, but it wasn't, to me, the strongest case against him. And it was the case that they were able to do this sham FBI investigation to justify that nothing could be corroborated. And so I feel like the women's groups, even the Women's March, which was having a rally right before Collins was speaking, was having people come up and tell their stories. Now, I'm all for, I believe, women. I believe Christine, the Me Too survivors march and rally here in Los Angeles. I support everything they do. But really, this guy, there were so many things that I think that if the Women's March, you know, and it's ironic because millennial feminists are supposed to be intersectional. They're supposed to be taking on everybody else's fight. Now, I personally have issues with intersectional feminism, which could be the subject of a different stream, but presumably, if you believe in intersectional feminism, you should have been fighting for the indigenous people in Alaska, which, by the way, they were extremely effective, because indigenous people make up over 15.5% of Alaska residents. Their rights would be completely taken away by Brett Kavanaugh, and they spent a lot of time meeting with Lisa Murkowski, who at least is an independent now. She used to be a Republican, but now she's an independent, and she got elected because of Native Americans. So she was listening to her constituents. Now, I don't know what was going on in Maine with women, with other people. I mean, I know that Maine is a Republican state, so I don't know. Maybe Susan Collins didn't get a lot of opposition. I certainly have heard that her staff and the interns weren't writing down the comments. There were people in her office that said people were calling in and they were like hanging up on them and not writing down any of their comments. But, you know, to Lisa Murkowski's credit, she listened to her constituents and she voted no. So now we have this Collins and this Manchin, and I predicted that, you know, when I looked at the fund to replace Susan Collins, which I have an issue with, by the way. Addie Barkin is a great activist, but to start a fund to collect $2 million from someone for some unnamed person without even there being an opponent, how are they going to decide who gets this money? What if there are multiple opponents? I mean, I personally don't want to contribute to something unless I know that this person is going to, you know, support the Bernie Sanders agenda pretty much. So I have tweeted him several times to find out how they're going to decide if there's multiple opponents or if they're going to run somebody. But like I said, with Joe Manchin, there was Paula Jean, who we should have been supporting. So I don't know. There's a lot of issues with this guy. Like I said at the beginning of this video, all of our institutions are captured. The Congress, the presidency, the courts, the media, the universities. I mean, we have the Koch brothers funding entire economics departments at universities, putting in their free market, Friedrich Hayek, you know, theory of economics. It is just completely outrageous to me that, you know, people do not see. I mean, this is why, you know, I'm more and more leaning to the call that a lot of people had at the beginning of the Trump presidency that we're heading towards fascism. I mean, I studied fascism in college, and I don't use that word very lightly, but really, quite frankly, we certainly have all the preconditions right now in this country. And don't even get me started on evangelical Christians. Born-again Christians. I had a long talk with my plumber the other day, who is one of those people. He doesn't even call himself religious. He says he follows the word of God. So, in other words, he denied the Old Testament. He said that the 10 Commandments are nothing that anybody could live up to. They're not the Word of God. I mean, the rationalizations that were coming out of this man's mouth. And he believes that Trump has been called by God to lead us into, I don't know, whatever they get led into. I mean, and you got to know that you got 20%, 25% of Americans who think like this. So, you know, in the days when we could have a national consensus, when we had 3 television networks and Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America, and everybody said when Walter Cronkite turned against the war is when we got out of the war. Well, we're not going to have any national consensus anymore. We have left-wing people believing left-wing sites. And the left-wing sites, by the way, aren't even so left-wing. When you talk about CNN and MSNBC being the liberal media, well, they're certainly not the progressive media. Keep fighting, and we need mass civil disobedience in this country over all this shit.